a seated cross-legged position, whatever is comfortable for you. If you need to, you can also use a chair. That's totally fine. But just pick a position that's comfortable for you, sitting on the floor or sitting in a chair. You can even sit back on your heels if you'd like. And just finding a little bit of stillness. Once you find that nice comfortable position, you can rest your hands on your knees or in your lap. And if you'd like to, you can close your eyes and just shifting your awareness to your breath. Just noticing the quality of your breath today. It might be fast, it might be slow, it might be shallow, or it might be deep, and there's nothing wrong with any of those. Just simply noticing the quality of it for now. Just sort of tuning in with ourselves here, seeing how we're feeling today. And now slowly bring some intention into your breathing, slowly lengthening the inhales and the exhales. You might even breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth if you choose. Just starting to bring some life into your breath, starting to wake yourself up. Really starting to feel the lungs expand as much as they can. And using a bit of energy to push the air back out as you exhale. Inhale, expanding. Exhale, pushing the air out and away. Let's go for 2 more deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and then just allowing the breath to slowly return to a more natural rhythm. Although you may notice that after breathing a little more deeply, just for a brief moment or a couple brief moments, and naturally your heart might be beating a bit faster, you might feel like you have a bit more energy. And slowly tuning into the whole body now, starting at the top of the head. And then just slowly scanning down through the head, through the neck, the shoulders, down the arms and the chest, through the waist, into the hips, the thighs, the calves, and the feet. And then slowly opening your eyes whenever you're ready. All right, so to begin the movement practice for the day, we're gonna keep our hips on the ground for now and just bring our feet out in front of us. You wanna get them a little bit wider than hip width. Your toes or your feet flat on the floor with your toes pointed slightly out to the sides. Now we're gonna start with our palms flat on the ground, just behind our hips, and just opening up the chest, trying to straighten the spine a little bit. You might even wanna gaze up slightly towards the ceiling to get your neck in a nice line. And make sure your chest is nice and open. You're pinching your shoulder blades back and together like you're trying to pinch a grape between your shoulder blades or something like that. And I find that visualization helps me a lot. And so you should be in this sort of like 4-point position with your hips on the ground as well. Or from the side, you would look something like this, okay? And from here, remember to continue breathing, but I'm not gonna give you a specific breathing pattern to stick with. Just make sure that you breathe as you move here. So keeping the feet out nice and wide, we're slowly going to drop one knee in as the other knee drops to the outside. So going to one side here. And once you get both knees down or close to the ground, because some people may have trouble getting both knees to the ground, and again, that's fine. But once you get them as low as you can, you want to think about this inside hip. So your knee that's fallen inward, that side of your hip, you want to think about sinking it down towards the ground. And that's going to help really get some internal rotation on that thigh. Just take a couple deep breaths here. And then slowly come back up to your neutral position, and then slowly rotate to the opposite side, or twist to the opposite side. And what we're doing here is getting internal rotation on that inner thigh and getting external rotation on that outer thigh. And once you get there, once you get your knees as low as you can, starting to sink that inside side of the hip down towards the floor to help get a little bit deeper in. Keep breathing, come back to a neutral position, and then drop to the other side. Hold briefly, press the hips down towards the floor. Come back to neutral, rotate to the other side. Press the hips down to the floor. And then one more time on both sides, we're coming back up to neutral, and then dropping the knees down, pressing the hips down, coming back up to neutral, dropping the knees down on the opposite side, pressing the hips down. Okay. Now we're going to start to make this a little bit more challenging. If this movement is already enough for you, and if this is working for you and you can feel your hips opening up and this feels good and you want to stick with it, go for it. If you want to start to make this a bit more challenging, I should say, we're going to bring our hands off the floor, interlace the fingers, and put the hands behind the head like this. So we're going to continue with the same movement here, slowly twisting, dropping the knees, and then sinking the hip down to the floor. But you'll notice that in order to keep your torso upright as you do this, so we'll slowly come back to a neutral position and then twist and turn to the opposite side again. In order to do this and keep your torso upright, you need a little bit more core activation here. So you really need to squeeze your six pack, squeeze your core to keep yourself upright, especially if your hip mobility is a bit of a challenge for you. You might also notice, like me, you kind of slide forward, so you may need to slide back again. But that's okay. Just keep going nice and slow, breathing with the movement, just picking a pace that works for you. And we'll do at least a few on either side. And if you still got your hands on the floor, that's totally fine. Just keep going with this. Try to be as mindful as you can, really feeling into the motion, feeling every little joint, every little pop and crack in the knees and the hips, maybe even in the ankles. And just keep moving. Now, if you're with me right now and you've got your hands behind your head and you want to go even further, once you get your knees down to the floor, so you're in this sort of 90-90 position where both knees are in roughly a 90-degree angle, from here you're going to gaze straight ahead of you, and you're going to slowly lift your hips up, squeeze your glutes, squeeze your butt muscles, so you're opening your hips as much as possible, and hold briefly at the top. And then slowly lower your hips back down to the floor. Twist, coming back to that neutral position. Drop the knees down to the opposite side. Lift the hips, squeeze the glutes. Opening up the front of the hips here too, okay? Slowly lowering back down. Doing this with as much control as possible, if you're with me. Again, if you want to stick with either of those previous variations, you are totally fine to do that. Just to pick the one that feels right for you. That's a challenge, but doesn't push you too far. It's not painful or anything like that. And you feel like you can perform this with good form, with good alignment. We'll do a few more of these, whichever variation you're sticking with. Breathing with the movement. And really starting to get really active through the hips here. Hopefully the hips are starting to warm up. And obviously, if we're sitting in a chair for a long period of time, we want to get those hips nice and open after a long day of work, sitting at the computer or at the desk or whatever you're doing at home right now. Maybe you're on the couch, I don't know. I used to do that when I worked at home. You want to get those hips open back up after you've been sitting down for a few hours. So let's do this one more time on either side, whichever variation you're with. And then we're going to come back to that neutral position. If your hands were up, you can put them back on the ground. And we're going to use our hands to slowly bring ourselves up onto our feet and sit in a deep squat for a little while. Trying to get your heels towards the ground. If that's not possible, that's okay. But just sinking into the most depth in your squat you can get to comfortably, and holding this for a little while while we mobilize our wrists. Okay, so we're going to start with palms together, interlacing the fingers, and then just slowly rolling the wrists around one another. And I'm actually going to come a little bit closer so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing here. So interlaced fingers and just rolling like this, really slow. Okay, hold your deep squat if you can. Push yourself, even if it's starting to burn a little bit, just keep holding, keep breathing, keep rotating those fists or wrists. And now we'll switch directions, going the opposite way. I shouldn't be making you guys sit in a deep squat and not do it myself. So I'm going to get back into my deep squat. And now what we're going to do is stick our wrists together. So for this one, I want you to think about, basically, it's almost like you're wearing magnetic bracelets, okay? And those bracelets do not want to come apart, all right? But in order to keep your wrists together as you do this, your fingers have to stay kind of splayed out like this. It almost creates, to me, it looks kind of like a flower almost, okay? And then what you're going to do is extend your arms straight out in front of you, so your palms are facing away from you, and then start to rotate your wrists like so, pretending like those magnetic bracelets do not want to come detached, starting to bend the arms and bring the wrists towards you now, bringing the hands up and through, and continuing to rotate the wrists like so. Really trying to keep those fingers out wide. That's going to help to stretch out all those tendons and ligaments and stuff in the wrists and the hands, even through the forearms. Let's do one more this direction, then we'll switch. Now we're going the opposite direction. Remember to keep breathing. If your deep squat's starting to get pretty pretty intense, try to hold it as long as you can. But you know what? I can't even see you guys. So if you drop down, hey, it's not the end of the world. But challenge yourselves. Keep rotating those wrists. Keep warming them up. Okay. Last one we're going to do today. I don't usually perform this one, but it's an important one, especially if you're working at your keyboard a lot. Again, we're interlacing the fingers, trying to get a really tight grip on our fingers here. And hopefully you can see this. I'm pressing my thumbs together like that. And I'm pushing them together as hard as I can to get like a good point of like leverage, I guess you might say. And then I'm going to put my arms straight out in front of me, flip my palms so they face down, keep my arms straight if possible, although to be honest, I can't keep my arms straight, and push my hands forward and keep pressing those thumbs together behind, okay? And what we're trying to do is get this stretch through the lateral aspect of the wrist here. So this point is always closed up. We want to open that up, especially when we start to get into some animal movement stuff, which we will in a moment. That part gets a little bit closed up. There's a bit of pressure that gets put on it. I'm just trying to open that up a little bit. Keep pressing, keep pushing. You can pulse kind of like I am right now. Just try and grip those fingers together. And then release. You can shake your hands out a little bit. Maybe go for a couple more of those snowballs if you want. And if you remained in your deep squat that whole time, you might want to come out of it for a brief moment just to give yourself a little bit of a rest. And breathe for a second. All right, so when you're ready, when you feel like your hips, all that has had enough of a break, we're going to come back into that deep squat position. We're going to start to practice the initial movements for what in animal flow is called ape for pretty obvious reasons. So we're sitting in our deep squat here. And what we're going to start to do is travel side to side in our space. Don't worry, you won't need too much space. But the first step here is to drop. I'm going to start with my right hand. My right hand is going to drop in front of my left foot. 6, maybe 8 inches in front of my left foot. Okay. Then I'm going to drop my left hand another foot, maybe 1.5 feet out towards the side. I'm going to come up onto my toes And I'm going to press into my hands, sort of leaning towards my side here. Okay. And I'm really pushing through my shoulders, protracting my shoulder blades as much as I can. So it's almost as though I could literally lift my toes right off the ground. And then I'm going to come back into that deep squat. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the opposite side. Left hand in front of right foot, right hand out wide, lift onto the toes, press through the palms, and hold briefly. And then slowly come back. Let's do it again on the other side. Dropping the hands down, lifting onto the toes, pressing into the ground, and holding briefly. Coming down, other side. Dropping the hands, lifting onto the toes, pressing into the ground, holding briefly. Coming back down, going to the other side, dropping the hands, lifting onto the toes, pressing into the palms, and slowly coming back. Now, we're going to start extending that out. So you may have already guessed what we're going to do is plant the palms. And you can watch me do this briefly if you'd like to. Planting the palms, just like we did, lifting onto the toes, pressing into the hands, and then we're going to push off the feet and swing across, nice and controlled. And then we're going to come back to the center doing the exact same thing. Planting the palms, lifting onto the toes, pressing into the hands, pushing off the feet, and swinging across. Try to do this with as much control as you can and with as much strength through your upper body, as much or more strength through the upper body as you're doing with the lower body and with the feet, okay? So going to the other side, planting the hands, lifting onto the toes, pushing into the palms, swinging across. Coming back to the middle. Let's go one more to the other side. And then again, coming back to the middle. So we're basically doing 2 to one direction, and then 2 again to the other direction, okay? Now, we're spending a lot of time in our deep squat here. If you guys need a little break at any point, feel free to go ahead and take it. But for those of you who are enjoying basically being a monkey, just continue on. Just remember to keep applying as much pressure through your upper body as you can, pressing into your palms firmly and trying to float across, okay? If you're really strong, you might even be able to literally float and hover for a second before dropping back down. Really starting to get warm now. Let's go for 2, maybe 3 more. Whenever you come back to your middle position, you can take a little break, take a little pause, and sit back down, okay? All right, so while we're taking a breather here, if you found that really challenging, that's totally normal. It's supposed to be a challenge. I would recommend starting with that first sort of constituent component. So we started in that deep squat, and we dropped the palms, lifted onto the toes, and pressed. You can literally just practice that until you feel strong enough and comfortable enough to then start to swing. And you can start to get really creative with these. You can start to go faster and wider. I find them really fun. So I'm probably as much monkey as I am person. But anyways, let's continue on. So sitting back onto our hips once again, I'm going to turn to the side so you guys can see me better. And we're going to start more or less in the same position we were in at the beginning, but just bring the feet a little bit closer. So my feet aren't out wide like they were before. They're about hip width now. My hands are planted behind me. I'm retracting my shoulder blades to open up my chest. I'm gazing up towards the wall or towards the ceiling. I guess it depends on how big your room is. But your neck should be, or you should be looking up at about a 45-degree angle. Okay. And from here, make sure your shoulder blades are retracted, pinched together, and you're activating all the muscles around your spine. And then from here, we're going to lift the hips up, just hovering the hips. Breathe deeply and just hold here just for maybe 10 seconds or so, just as a little test here. We may have actually done this one before, but if this is new, this is your little test. If it's not new, then this is practice. And then slowly lowering the hips back down. If you're more than comfortable holding yourself in that position with your hips up over the floor, like we were just doing, then I want you to go back into that. If that was a serious challenge to hold yourself up for a little while, then I want you to keep your hips on the floor for this. Whichever one you choose, hips down or hips up, we're going to pick our position, lifting the hips up if you're with me. And from here, we're going to start to lift one limb at a time off the ground. So we'll start with the left foot. Think about bringing the knee into the chest just a little bit, just to lift that left foot up. And then dropping that foot down. And then lifting the right foot. Bring the knee slightly into the chest. And then lowering back down. And now the left hand, elevating the shoulder blade. So hunching, or not hunching, but shrugging the shoulder up towards the ear, maybe bending the elbow a little bit. And then dropping your left hand down. And now the right hand, shrugging the shoulder up towards the ear, bending at the elbow a little bit, and then dropping back down, okay? You can take a rest if you need to, especially if you've got your hips off the floor. If not, we're gonna try lifting 2 limbs at a time here. Make sure that they're limbs on the opposite sides of the body. So let's start with lifting the left foot and the right hand and seeing if we can find balance. And then down. Now let's try the right foot and the left hand, seeing if we can find balance. And then down. All right. Let's do a few more of these. So lifting the left foot and the right hand off the ground. And if you want even more of a challenge, you can come up onto the right toe. So notice that my right heel is now lifted, trying to stabilize through the core, using the back, the hips, all those muscles along the spine and in the hips. Now let's try right foot, left hand, lift onto the toes if you want an extra challenge, and then back down. Left foot, right hand, lift onto the toes if you want the extra challenge, and back down. Right foot, left hand, onto the toes, maybe, and back down. Okay, now let's take a little bit of a break here. We're gonna add one more variation onto this. If this was already a challenge for you guys and you're feeling like just finding balance is tough, believe me, I wouldn't be surprised if that was everybody right now. It took me even a very long time to find solid balance in these. This is called crab activations because this position is called crab. If you want a little extra challenge, we're going to try this to finish off our movement for the day, and then we'll cool down with a little bit of breathing at the end. So picking your position, your hips might be down or you might be lifting them up, okay? Now let's start with a lift of the left foot and the right hand. If you want the extra challenge, lift onto the toes and slowly rotate so that you land in this sort of opposing position, okay? And now we're gonna try to do the opposite. So we're lifting, again, our right hand and our left foot and rotating back. All right, this is a complex movement, so if you want to stick with just the limb lifts, that's fine. If you want to keep trying this, let's go for the opposite side. Lifting the right foot and the left hand, coming up onto the toes, slowly turning, landing in our opposing position. This is called beast. Lifting the left hand, right foot again, rotating, landing in crab. Let's do that one more on either side. Lifting the left foot and the right hand, coming up onto the toes, rotating, landing, lifting those same limbs up again, rotating, landing. One last one on the other side. Right foot up, left hand up on the toes, rotating, landing, and then slowly returning to crab. You can lower yourself down to wherever you were. Taking nice deep breaths. You can stretch your legs out a little bit, and we're gonna finish things off lying down. All right, so you're gonna stretch your legs out in front of you. Woo. Slowly lie down on the ground. And you want your palms facing up towards the ceiling. Try and lengthen through the neck a little bit. So it almost feels as though your chin kind of drops down into the neck, almost like you're kind of like making a double chin, sort of, but not quite. And just melting into the floor. Like butter on top of pancakes. I don't know why I thought about that right now, but I did. So we're gonna melt like butter into the floor. And just breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, and draw your awareness to your belly. If you want to get really specific, bring your awareness to your belly button. And notice how as you breathe in, your belly sort of rises like a loaf of bread or something. And then as you exhale, your belly falls downward toward the floor. You inhale, your belly rises. And as you exhale, the belly falls. Just continue breathing at your own pace. And focusing on the area of the belly button, maybe even deeper into the core, the diaphragm, the stomach. Slowly lengthening the exhales. Feeling the relaxation melting further into the floor with each exhale. Let's take one last deep breath in through the nose. Sigh it out through the mouth. Then you're going to bring your right arm sort of up overhead and slowly roll onto your right side. I'm rolling onto my left side so I don't hit the couch here. And just rest here for a brief moment before slowly coming up. Or maybe you don't want to. Maybe you just want to stay on the floor because nobody can see you anyways.